Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create a grid of hexagon shapes reminiscent of a hexagon pattern in Illustrator. Before we get started with this video tutorial, let's look and see what it is that we're going to be doing. We're going to create this hexagon pattern in Illustrator, but before you think that this is done with the pattern tool, think again. These individual hexagons are just that, individual hexagons which have been created, positioned, and filled independently. And there's a really good reason for this, and that is that the pattern tool in Illustrator really isn't going to play fair with us on this. While we could create a hexagon pattern, we wouldn't have the flexibility of easily being able to identify, select, and fill with a specific color or pattern or gradient individual hexagons. So I'm going to show you how you can create this pattern fairly quickly and fairly easily in Illustrator. We are going to use the pattern tool, but we're going to do that with a twist. So to get started with this solution, I'm going to create just a brand new document. Mine's 960 by 560 pixels in size, but yours can be any size that you wish. I'm going to click the rectangle tool to get access to the polygon tool, and I'm going to click once in the middle of my image. I'm setting my radius to 50 and my size to 60, and I'll click OK. I'm going to fill this shape with a color, and then I'm going to remove the stroke from it. So I just have a filled shape, and it's a hexagon. With the selection tool, I'll select it and choose Object, Transform, Rotate. And I'm going to rotate this through 30 degrees, so I'll click OK. And that makes it, or rotates it, so its point is uppermost. Now, if this bounding box is upsetting to you, if it looks a little bit weird, then you can choose Object, Transform, Reset Bounding Box. And now you get this sort of upright bounding box. Now we're going to create this as a pattern, even though we're not going to use the pattern as our solution. So I'm choosing Object, Pattern, Make. I'll click OK, and I'm just bringing in the pattern options dialog. At this stage, all I'm concerned about is changing the grid to brick by row. So this is a bit more like what I want my pattern to look like. I have this icon here deselected, so this allows me to independently set the width and the height for this pattern. So I'm going to set my height here to 94 pixels, and that adjusts the space between these horizontal elements. Now I'm going into the height box and I'm going to start reducing that because I want to reduce the space between these elements. And I think it's going to need to be about 82. Well, I'm thinking 81 will be good. So you might want to just eyeball that until you get what looks to you like a nice even spacing. And then click Done. That leaves you with just your shape here, and now we're going to create a rectangle, a really nice big rectangle, so that we can fill it with our pattern. I'm going to select the foreground color here, and from my swatches palette I'm going to select the pattern that I've just created. And here's my honeycomb or hexagon pattern. Now at this point you might be thinking it's going to be easy to be able to extract these hexagons from the pattern. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Let's just look and see what happens. I'm going to choose Object, Expand, and I'm going to expand the fill and click OK. Now let's go to the Layers palette and see what we have. For now I'm just going to move this path, this one hexagon, out of the way into its own layer. And I'm just going to turn it off so we can't see it. So we can just focus on this rectangle filled with the pattern. And let's just see what was in there. Well, all of this is in there and it keeps going even further. So for a start, if we're going to get the hexagons out of here, we're going to have to be working within all of these groups. But let's just see what a group is. I'm just going to choose one of these groups, and when I turn it off you can see that the group actually covers a rectangle shape. There's nothing that looks hexagonal in what I'm selecting and turning on and off here. So for a start it's going to be difficult for you to open up each of these groups. You can see that there's a clipping group for each one of them, and then just isolate the piece that you want to get the hexagon back out. So this would be a potential hexagon shape. But I think it's very difficult to do that, and I think that if you want to just create a series of hexagons, there's a much easier way of doing it. But we're going to start with this pattern. So I'm actually going to lock this down so that this rectangle won't move, because it's just going to get in my way if it does. I'm going back to my single hexagon shape, and I'm going to select it. And I'm going to fill it with a different color so it's going to be easy for me to see. I'm going to place it approximately over one of the hexagons in the pattern, and I'm going to zoom in. Now I want to zoom right in, very close. I'm going to take the selection tool and I'm going to move this shape up so it's exactly over the hexagon in the pattern underneath. Now you may find that that's a little difficult to do that, and you might find that you can't line it up perfectly. Well, if that happens to you, go to Window and then Transform. And make sure that you disable the Align to Pixel Grid option here, and that will give you a lot more flexibility in moving these shapes into position. So now what I'm going to do is just Alt or Option drag on this shape, and I'm going to create a second one just over here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, but not very far at all, but just a little bit so I can see what's going on. You might also be seeing at this stage something that is a little bit of a problem with these patterns, in that they're not 100% going to match up. We'll be close, but we probably won't be able to get it 100%. So now I've got two pieces that are nicely spaced. I'm going to select both of them, click on one, shift click on the other, and then I'm going to Alt or Option drag on them to create the next set. Now these two shapes are selected, so I can move them into position very accurately together. And once I've got them in position, I'm going to Alt or Option drag on them again to continue to fill in these shapes. I'm using the pattern underneath as a guide for placing these pieces in position. And again, Alt or Option drag. Just make sure everything's lined up as well as I can get it. Alt or Option drag. I'm going to zoom out at this stage just to see how I'm going. And of course, how much of this you fill in depends on how many hexagons you need for the project you're working on. At the moment I have 5, so I'm going to again hold the Alt or Option key as I drag on these to make 6. I'll want to zoom in at this stage just to make sure that I've got these lined up as best I can, and then zoom out again. Control or Command 0 allows me to put the image, the artboard, back in position, so that's a nice easy way of getting back to where we were. Now remembering that my pattern filled layer underneath here is locked down, I can go to the selection tool, I can go and grab all of these shapes, select all of them, Alt or Option drag, and now I'm going to move all of those into position. Again, zoom in while I've got them selected and just make sure that they're nicely aligned. I don't want to see too much orange color, because any orange color that I see is the pattern underneath that is seeping through. It's telling me that I haven't got my pieces exactly aligned. Now you'll be able to deal with a very fractionally small amount of movement, but you don't want too much. The smallest amount that you have, the neater this pattern's going to look. So now again, Alt or Option drag away, and this is going to be the last piece that I do. Again, I've got a big range of pieces here that I'm working with, so I'm just going to move them into position so they're nicely over the top of the piece underneath, and I'm going to zoom out with Control or Command 0. So now that I've done this, I can go ahead and get rid of the underlying pattern. So I'm just going to turn that off. And what I'm left with is a whole series of hexagons that look like a hexagon pattern, but every single one of these is individually shaped and positioned. And this allows me to then go ahead and do things with these shapes. For example, I can fill them with a gradient. So I'm going to click on the gradient tool here. Let's go and get a summer gradient. It's a radial gradient, and so this shape now has a gradient applied to it. Let's go and get another one and again apply a gradient to it, but say we want this to be a different color. Well, I'm going to double click on the color selector at the end of the gradient and just go and click on a different color. So it's very easy for me to separately select now and deal with these individual shapes. It was a lot less trouble for me to create this grid of hexagons using the hexagon pattern underneath to just line everything up than it would have been to try and pull that pattern apart and stick everything back together again the way I wanted it to be. So there's a way of creating a hexagon pattern with individual hexagon pieces in Illustrator. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.